So welcome to our federal government and territories and state stimulus package regarding COVID-19. I'm John Mackenzie, I'll be your presenter for the day, and we're going to be going through what support packages are available to help small medium enterprise business. Now, this particular presentation has been supported by Business Station and the Australian Small Business Advisory Services Digital Solutions. Digital Enterprises and Human Factors Cybersecurity are partners in delivering this particular presentation, and we're excited to help you through the challenges that we face today, so you're more aware of what is available to you, and hopefully to demystify some of the fog or some of the challenges, so you can get on with life and surviving in some pretty difficult times. So we're aware that most small businesses are living through these challenging times at the moment, and it's difficult to understand exactly what to do and when to do it. And I think that what we're trying to do here is to support you on that particular journey. Now, my name is John Mackenzie. I'm a founder of numerous businesses, and I previously worked for the federal government in the Entrepreneurs Program for Oz Industry. I've advised companies up to $100 million and worked as a key supply chain facilitator on large corporate transactions. Now, I've got a specialist knowledge in innovation pathways, growing businesses, automation and risk mitigation, as well as managing costs of the business to get through in tough times. Anyway, enough of that, let's get right into it. So today I'm going to talk about the federal government stimulus package, what's available to small medium enterprise. You may be aware of some of these things, and they do change on a regular basis. I'm also going to touch base with other support mechanisms from the states and territories, in particular, Northern Territory Government, the Queensland Government and the Western Australian Government. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, these particular packages do change fairly regularly. In fact, as I was stepping through one or two of the websites today, I'd noted that they'd already changed early this morning. One of the greatest challenges we face today is not only the uncertainty, which creates some anxiousness as business owners, it's also about understanding what to do and when to do it. And it's really tough. And we're here to support you through that pathway. Now, today's about demystifying some of that fog. One of the things I really want to impress on you is because it is tough and there's so much information out there, and it is changing regularly. So what I'd like you to, the first things I'd like your major takeaway to be is when you have a doubt of something, or you're looking at following something up, please jump back onto the key websites so you can get the facts from the government or the jurisdiction. Their information is changing very regularly, so it's easy to get ourselves caught out by going down a pathway with not following what is occurring or what those changes are. So at the moment, I'm just about to click through. So at the moment, we've got a lot of programs and initiatives from the Australian government. And as I said, please keep abreast of what those are by touching base with their websites, because they're the ones that are keeping most of the information up to date. Now, there is some early childhood education and care relief packages. Some of these packages are supporting around outside of vacation care and outside of school hours. It's trying to cover some of the challenges that companies or businesses, families, but also those industry partners are going through at the moment. Not many people will be in this particular space, but if you do have a need, please do jump onto the website and have a look at what those childcare packages look like. They may be the difference in supporting you, in buying you time so you can work on your business and how you can find a way forward with that. Moving right along, Jobkeeper payment for employees. This is a critical part of the government, the federal government support mechanism, the Jobkeeper payment and also the COVID-19 payment. So the Jobkeeper payment is for $1,500 for each employee, and it was for up to 6 months as of 30th of March. Now, the important thing here is it's casual employees that had demonstrated that they were part of the business prior to the cut-off time. That cut-off time has changed, and some of the rules do change, so it's worth getting onto the Jobkeeper site so you're fully aware of those changes as they do come through. Now, important consideration is the $1,500 for whether it be casuals or for full-time employees. Full-time employees is anyone working inside the business on a full-time basis. Now, from what I understand, and we've had a look at this from not only the BAS requirement and also from filling in the Jobkeeper forms for numerous businesses, it is for any employee that sits within that particular environment that is deemed full-time. So it might be something worth exploring. Now, it can be a challenge to fill out the forms, meet the compliance requirements and get it back in, but it is very much worth it. If you've got 5 employees being a small business, they're all full-time equivalents, then it ends up being $7,500 or $1,500 per person per fortnight, $15,000 a year. That can very much be the difference between hibernating, getting through the tough period, and then coming out the other end with those jobs intact. The reason for this particular package is the federal government are very keen, very supportive of keeping those jobs in play, making sure that those people have got jobs to go back to at the end of the lockdown, the close down. Something I might add is it's worth taking the time out of your day. And I know it can be very difficult in managing your time or the frustration with so many changes and so many different forms that we need to fill in. But getting it done very early and very fast is very important. Preserving your cash wherever possible is one of the most important things that you can do in any business at any time. More so today in COVID-19 and what we're facing than ever before. Having that cash reserve to ensure that you have the support or the certainty or keeping what's left of what you have is one of the most important things for a business. If you've got any questions, please drop them in the chat and I'll get to them as I see them. So as I said, it's for full-time, part-time employees, casual workers who have had regular work with the business. Those particular instructions have changed, and it is worth very much going to the Australian Government's Treasury website to see what those changes are and how, when you step through some of the case studies, you might meet the requirements of the Jobkeeper program. I have spoken to a number of businesses. Some are finding it difficult to comply with the eligibility, and others have found it very, very supportive in getting that cash into the business and having the certainty around that. Deferred business loan repayments. The Australian government, federal government came out with a package supported by the Australian Banking Association. Please note that there is a website there that you can go to for more information. This particular package was created to help small, medium enterprise to get through and defer their loan repayments for any loan that you might have from a business perspective, equipment finance, or even overdraft requirements. This is all with the intention of helping businesses with a cash liquidity problem, being cash in bank, to get through and to provide certainty so you could focus on the immediate challenges, the immediate costs that can't be deferred. This package was a very significant package by the federal government, up to $130 billion of support to enable or allow the banks to make a decision to support the Australian business community and help us get through. I think that with this one here, if you've got the capacity to make repayments, I would recommend that you look at the deferment option. It's always best to preserve cash inside a business rather than being exposed at some point in the future, not knowing what revenue, what your expenses, or what your net free cash might look like and contribute to your bank account available cash in the future. It's always worth keeping that up your sleeve at the moment, you can come back and catch up on a deferred payment if you do trade through this 6 months or the next 9 months in a reasonably strong position. What I'm finding is most businesses are more struggling than the latter, being the strong position. So I would suggest if you were in a mediocre position, or a position where you've got some cash remaining, I would initiate earlier deferred business loan repayments to consider how you might get through and protect your net free cash of your business. And then if you've got that cash remaining at the end of the period, then you make those catch-up payments at that point. So the cash flow support is all about providing relief from financial distress. Now, it's very important for you to go through that. There is different mechanisms in the marketplace that you can refer to that can give you advice. There's business advice on the marketplace that can help with that. But there's also other support mechanisms. Some of the cash flow support that we've got here can be things around amenity costs, power, water, rates. They've come through from different elements, from different government, whether it be local government or the state or territory government or the federal government. It's worth having a look at what's happening in your local area, so you can have a look at perhaps what options you have available to not only supporting your ongoing operating costs, to mitigate that payment and or defer it completely for a period of time. The same thing goes with paying of rent. So not only have the government looked at the bank costs, whether it be mortgage or business costs relating to equipment finance or similar, but also in terms of rental or lease costs. This is a bespoke discussion when you're speaking to a landlord in regards to what options are available. Now, when you have a look at the support mechanism from the federal government, what they did is they supported the banks from a mortgage or a financial lending position. So those landlords would not be put under financial pressure to meet the biggest cost line of operations for holding a building, which is the financial costs. The reason why they did that is so some of that support could be passed on to the renter, to the lessees, because it's quite difficult for businesses going through the time that we are today. We've got other forms of support for not-for-profits, which I'm not going to go into here today, and Australian charities, but that can be looked at once again from the Australian government's website. Company directors, this is a very important one. Normally, as company directors or business owners, we are at risk when we go through downturns of hitting insolvency, particularly if we end up hitting a trigger point of failure. The federal government have supported with legislative changes for 6 months in the company directors being exempt from personal liability for insolvency. The reason they did that is they were quite understanding that many businesses and their business owners would be going through some very difficult, troubling times. During these times, the government understood that there would be insolvency or potential insolvency risk for business owners, whether it be directors or small, medium enterprise operators. Now, the reason why they came in with the legislative changes was to provide confidence to you as a business owner, as a director, to make a decision that you can not trigger a legislative risk personally in regards to your personal liability of insolvency. Now, this is for 6 months. That time can be seen from not only the Australian Institute of Company Directors website, but it can also be seen from the Australian government in terms of the packages and support and how long that goes for. What you need to be mindful of is what happens at the end of that particular term, that period of 6 months. You also might need to keep abreast of any changes that might occur in the last 4 weeks to 8 weeks prior to that time, and see if the federal government come out with any continued support that may be of a challenge at the end of that particular 6 months, particularly in regards to insolvency. It's very important for you to consider that you've recovered your cash position and your ability to return to some form of normality and maintain your ability to meet your commitments at the end of that 6 months. Please be mindful of that, because the exemption is very, very important from a personal liability point of view. If you've got further doubt around that, please don't hesitate to reach out to Business Station and support in regards to what that changes might look like and how that might impact you into the future. So one of the important elements that the government came out with, the federal government, was access to credit. The government provided a guarantee of 50% to small business lenders for new short-term unsecured loans to help businesses get through. The access to credit is really important to allow business owners to trade through, to pay the things that they need to, the obligations that they've got coming up, and to make those or meet those obligations as they do step through. Part of this particular package was unsecured loans. So the unsecured element of this position meant that the government provided support mechanisms to businesses that may not have been able to procure or to access credit in tough times at such short notice. Now, the reason, once again, the federal government came out with this particular package was to support the mechanism and retain jobs in the marketplace, so people would have jobs to go back to. The unsecured loan meant that there was no personal guarantee or director's guarantee that needed to be provided. So please be mindful of that if you're speaking to any of your financiers in regards to what they may or may not be asking. I'm aware that different banks are looking at different considerations in how they are assessing not only the unsecured loan or support to the business, but also the documentation that you may be requested to sign. Once again, if the banks are looking at asking for a personal guarantee or some other form of guarantee or security from you, please be mindful that is not the intent of this particular package, and those banks will be in technical breach of the support package that was requested of them. This is a very important part of your pathway forward. It can be used to maintain operations, but also to be used to scale back up or get your employees back in front of your customers as we step through the next 6 months and we come back out of any form of lockdown. So I'm just looking at going to our next slide, and my mouse, here we go. So the assistance package is quite a large one that the federal government have supported. As of the 22nd of March, it was $189 billion across a whole range of different support mechanisms, and that effectively was 9.7% of the annual GDP for Australia. Now, please be mindful that that has increased since then, as there has been some more support mechanisms come out. So, just having a look to see if there's any questions come through. Can't see any, so please, if you've got any questions, do drop them in the chat. Support for individuals and households. Very important part of this package was support that would also help consumers and also people that may have found some challenges in job retention, and also how they could keep their households. Excuse me. A couple of really important packages here was the income support for individuals, which is a COVID-19 employment support package, which basically doubled the unemployment package for a period of 6 months. Now that there was to step through and make it easier for individuals if you're a casual and you've been let go or you weren't getting any work, and that was making it easier so that you could survive and get through whilst you had a whole range of support packages in terms of deferment of mortgages or cards or financial costs, health costs, or living costs in relation to amenities, whether it be rent, electricity, power, gas, and so on. These packages are all about putting our lives effectively into some form of hibernation to step through, not looking at keeping us living well, but it's more about so we can afford to get through and put food on the table. One of the access points here was a temporary release of superannuation of people that met the eligibility requirement. Now, please be mindful that the eligibility requirement is very important. It will be tested from the federal government to ensure that this particular package is not being abused. Now, the package is up to $10,000 of superannuation that may be withdrawn from your super fund prior to 30 June, and up to $10,000 for the first few months of next financial year after the 1st of July that may be withdrawn again. That's a combined package of up to $20,000. It's really important to understand that that could have a fairly large impact on your future retirement, and depending on your position where you are today, your needs to access funds to get through, being that 10,000 in 2 different tranches or 2 different lots, and your retirement time into the future, the deadline of how far that may be away. Speaking to your financial advisor or taking on board some form of advice would be advisable, so you can consider what impact that might have on you in the long term, on whether or not that you could look to some other form of package that could support you or your employees in the short term. So some of the support at the moment is the boosting cash flow for employers, the temporary relief for financial distress. Another one is the increasing the instant asset write-off. So any assets that are being purchased before now, on the 30th of June, up to $150,000, get an instant write-off. Anything after that period of time have got an accelerated period of write-off as well. There's also packages in regards to apprentices and trainees. I'm not completely over the apprentices and trainees package. I have read it. I did read it earlier in the piece, and they have changed a number of times since my reading. But what I understand, it's very much involved in businesses of less than 20 employees looking to retain or to expand their apprentices through this period of time. But I'm not completely on top of that particular package. And there are so many packages, so it's not unusual not to be on top of one part of a package or one part of a jurisdiction package as well. So I'm just stepping through the next slide. There is a lot of immediate cash flow support packages for small medium. It's a lot of it sits around access to the COVID-19 Jobkeeper, but also the amenities, access to credit for businesses to trade through these difficult times. If you are having challenges with that particular environment, access to credit, it could be worth either reaching back out to the federal government or to speak to the bank in particular and challenge them on their process, their timeline, or some other mechanism. If you find that, that the bank isn't supportive and not meeting, in your view, your needs as per the Australian federal government support package, like with any dealings with the bank, you've always got options to go to the banking ombudsman to discuss how you see that the bank has not been supportive or fair in its dealings with you. Okay. So we're going to step into one of the jurisdictional locations or territory. We're going to start with the Northern Territory. Now, we are on time at the moment. It's sitting at about 25 minutes in. If you've got any questions, please do drop them into the chat. I will ask for more questions towards the end of this. So we are tracking very much in front of our timeline. You know, I would like to talk to anyone in regards to what they're experiencing in the marketplace or how they're seeing their cash flow that might be having some challenges. As I said, one of the biggest challenges that I see at the moment is small medium is finding it difficult to wade through some of the complexity of filling in the different packages or the different sites or the different forms. It is fairly complex. I would suggest you write a sheet out. You have a look at the packages that from a federal perspective and also your local government or jurisdiction, in this case the Northern Territory, and have a look at what those packages might be, and then start to step through some of the requirements of those packages. The first thing I would do when you're having a look at that is see if you are eligible. Find out what the intent of that particular package is and identify whether or not you comply with the eligibility of that. If you don't comply, I would park that particular package and maybe come back to it. And then I would step through all the different packages that you do comply, you do meet the eligibility. That'll allow you to focus on things that you can get support with earlier, rather than getting bogged down and even frustrated with some of the packages that you see that you may not have access to. Unfortunately, we are stepping through some very, very difficult times that I see that businesses are experiencing that. I've ran many, many small businesses myself. I understand some of the challenges that we face, but also see that one of the complexities that we have is the federal government and also the state jurisdictions are looking to try and solve those particular problems. And it's been very difficult to create a package that meets the needs of everybody in that particular subset. So my recommendation again is to write down the list of the packages from a federal government perspective and also from your state or territory, and then write those out and determine whether or not you meet the eligibility and then how you might be able to support getting through there. So the Northern Territory, this is quite a large section. I've focused on the Northern Territory as part of the subset of this webinar, simply because we're delivering this primarily in the Northern Territory. I do touch on Western Australia and Queensland as we've stepped through the Northern Territory support mechanisms. Now, one of the things that we need to talk about is as we've moved along the time horizon, which has been fairly rapid, and one of the things we need to consider is that 3 months ago, we really had no consideration of a coronavirus or COVID-19. Now, within 3 months, a lot has changed. The packages that have come out have been very large. They've been complex in understanding them, and it can be difficult to work out how we comply. The other particular challenge is some of the time openings for some of these packages have moved pretty rapidly. Now, what that's meant is either the opening date and closing dates have come and gone, or the packages have been completely absorbed, completely used from the marketplace through the businesses that have had that need. Nonetheless, if we have a look at the Northern Territory here, we can see that the general packages of support have come down into these elements. There's been a $50 million small business survival fund that has been expanded significantly. I believe that reached up to 90 million and beyond. There was a $2 million fund to support arts, creative and screen industry sectors. There was a $200,000 grant program to support tourism operators. Now, that particular one there was on top of the Small Business Survival Fund, and certainly on top of the fund that helps businesses that were impacted by the close down or the lockdown. There's also a $1.3 million fund to support sport and recreation sector. So there's been lots of changes that's come through, not only to the packages, but also how legislation, I touched on earlier, how insolvency was operating from a federal perspective, but it's also from a jurisdictional perspective. I'm aware that NCAT, so the Northern Territory Civil and Tribunal, had adjusted their ability to meet any particular cases, and that was because they didn't have access to a whole range of different things. They are coming back online at the moment, which would be similar to other jurisdictions, Western Australia and Queensland. So, but unfortunately, there has been some planning approval regulations that have been suspended in light of the challenges that we face, but also in regards to the Job Rescue and Recovery Plan. The best way of keeping on top of that is understanding how that might affect you. Changes to planning rules for COVID-19, in particular for the Northern Territory, is worth having a look at. Some of the support that has come down for the Northern Territory has sat around bringing forward capital expenditure from a home improvement scheme, a business improvement scheme, and immediate works grants. Now, some of the changes to the planning rules have been altered from the Northern Territory Government to allow the government's job rescue and recovery plan to be fast-tracked. It is worth understanding what those changes from a regulatory or legislation perspective is, if in fact you are a business that is delivering packages to the consumer or to businesses, so you do not, so you're aware of what those changes are, so what your requirements to regulations and legislation are, so that you don't breach your requirement to fulfil that. So when we have a look at the Northern Territory Government, there's also been support from a reduction in payroll tax. So territory businesses that demonstrate a substantial hardship can request for their payroll tax for 6 months to be abolished. Now that's if they're small, medium enterprise. From my understanding, from recollection, I think it was less than $7.5 million in PAYG. Now, one of the things that has changed in substantial hardship, I've seen on different websites for different legislations, substantial hardship is anywhere from 30% to 50% reduction in revenue. Now, it's worth having a look at the specific package to see what part of that range of substantial hardship they are referring to. Please know that there is different views from different bodies into what substantial hardship and the eligibility and what that looks like for you personally. The payroll tax may be deferred if you're a larger business, if they meet certain requirements as well. Power, water and sewage bills can be cut by up to 50% for 6 months if you also meet those particular packages. Now, I do know that that is a separate application form. One of the challenges that unfortunately we face is that there are so many jurisdictional requirements, whether it be local government, whether it be state or territory government and federal government, and also if we go to other support mechanisms such as from our amenity or utility hardship programs, and including the banks. Each one of those, unfortunately, does have a different eligibility requirement, different forms, and different compliance requirements for us to, in fact, jump through. That can be quite frustrating because it becomes very, very time-consuming, and it can be a challenge in itself. So as we step through, we're going to touch on the commercial tenancies, in particular to the Northern Territory. There is support here. Once again, it is and does link towards commercial tenants that can demonstrate economic hardship. They need to request the rental relief from the landlord, and then the negotiation of this relief needs to be discussed and supported. Now, I understand that the federal government have mentioned that under numerous times from communication that they will be looking at how commercial landlords and those tenants are in fact responsibly supporting each other, given the support from the federal government and the jurisdictions. So it is very much worthwhile, if you are having some challenges with a landlord that aren't coming to the party, that you in fact do understand that that particular landlord, it's quite possible that they have been supported from the federal government or from the Northern Territory government through packages that support them. And if they're not passing that on to you, you do have mechanisms that you can support, that can support you in following that up. The first thing that you may want to do is communicate with those particular landlords and understand what the challenges that they're facing. If they're open to some form of transparency there, a lot will not be. But if they are, you'll have some visibility on how to negotiate or find a amicable outcome for you. But if you find difficulties with that, then once again, it would be worth exploring other avenues, which can take a lot longer. One would be speaking to your banks to support with some form of access to credit initially, and then also speaking to the residential's tenancy government body in terms of what they suggest in dealing with difficult landlords, and if it even becomes further, even putting in something like an NCAT or a civil tribunal tenancy challenge, so you can get some form of support. I think I've just talked through that. So the commercial landlords, if they do not negotiate in good faith with their tenants, they're not going to be eligible for relief coming to them from economic support challenges. So what you need to do is make sure that from your point of view that you are seeing some of that support and you are feeling that support. And if that's not occurring, look to the federal government considerations or suggestions on what the next steps are and how you can put more pressure on your landlord to come to that table and talk to you about how you may look for some form of support. Always difficult challenges. So there's a worker and wellbeing fund that's been established to support through Centrelink. Part of this sits within the coronavirus COVID-19 support fund, but there is also lots of other helplines out there at the moment to support the financial and well-being of your employees, of your workers, to see that they are getting some form of support, because it can be very, very difficult as a small, medium employer at the moment. We've got a whole range of legislation that seems to be more complex through the lens of COVID-19, whether it be through Fair Work Australia or whether it be through the National Employment Standards. Understanding what our obligations are at the moment and how that translates in the market today is very, very difficult. A lot of it is working in good faith and to be seen to be doing the right thing for the right reasons. So I've already stepped through the jobs rescue and recovery. From the Northern Territory perspective, there's a whole range. Home improvement scheme, that has been fully subscribed, but that date has come and gone. The business improvement grant, the same there. I'm not aware of the immediate work grant. I'm not aware of that particular deadline. Small medium business survival fund and the business hardship packages, once again, they do have changed in recent times. I have already been on the Northern Territory website and have seen that some of those pages have been updated as early or as late as this morning at 7 a.m. in the morning. So it's worth keeping up to speed on what requirements and what those eligibility requirements, and even in fact if they remain open. So the Territory Government came out with a concept called the Territory Jobs Hub. You can find that online if you type in Territory Jobs Hub, and it's a support engine or website for Territory businesses that are looking for employees to fill the requirements they have at the moment. But it's also there for workers or people that have lost their jobs or hours that are looking for more support, more opportunities to either regain employment or to regain hours to step through the difficult times. So it's a great initiative from the Northern Territory Government to support the the communication between employers and employees or prospect employees. So if you're near Northern Territory and you have a need from either point of view or either perspective, it is actually worth jumping onto that site, having a look, and even if you're not needing it today, have a look on perhaps how you might be able to keep it in mind for as you step back out of the shutdown. Now for the Northern Territory, that looks like we're getting there closer and closer with some stage 1 and stage 2 rollbacks coming, in the next week, and then more coming in the first week of June. So as I mentioned earlier, there is a support tourism package for Northern Territory Northern Territory businesses. it's worth having a look at what that support package is. The information has been held and supported by the KPMG Business Support, and it's part of the Tourism Resilience Plan. It's quite a good strategy from from the NT government. I'm just going through at the moment, seeing if I can find more on that in terms of where we are at the moment. No, I can't see it on my screen, but it is worth having a look at how that might be supportive to you. If you've got any questions, please once again drop them in below. I'm just having a look at the chat. We are trending pretty well on our timeline. So I'm just having a look at this at the moment. It's on the Northern Territory Tourism NT website. It's all about understanding what the requirement is. Okay, I'm just trying to see the Q&A. My Q&A hasn't come through to me. I can see that I've got one, but I can't see it. Okay, that's going to be dropped into my chat here. So I'm just waiting for that to come through. So the KPMG requirement under the Northern Territory Tourism, it's here to support Northern Territory operators that have faced COVID-19 challenges. So I'm just saying here, if Australia can contain this COVID-19 earlier, the Jobkeeper will be reduced short before September 30. Look, I was watching that particular question that was asked of a journalist of the Prime Minister. Scott Morrison replied with, the package has been approved by Parliament. It's been set up to provide the support. He didn't blatantly say it would not be reduced or shortened. I would be suggesting that that it is not the case. So JobKeeper will be there for the duration of that 6-month period. What I have seen is some changes on the website though, and I have seen feedback from the delivery of the particular package. So from an eligibility point of view, what I have seen is the hardship has to be, or looks like it's changed, it has to be demonstrated on a month-by-month basis. The original intention of the package from when it first came out did not seem that that was the case, that if you met the eligibility and you were deemed acceptable into the program Jobkeeper, then you had access to it. It looks like there has been some variations to that since. Now, that might be what you may be alluding to, or it may be that's something that you need to keep in mind when you're accessing these particular packages. I think one of the challenges that we're seeing at the moment when we go to a lot of the announcements, being the communication themselves, the initial feedback and then the follow-up feedback after the case, is that there is variations or changes that's coming through. And that can be very difficult from a business owner point of view, because what we think we know to be true based on one read or one contextual understanding of whether it be our eligibility or our compliance, there are changes that are coming through after that. So all I can suggest is if you've nominated for a particular package or support, then what you do is you then go back and check that on a semi-regular basis to see if you have any exposed risk of that particular change. Now, the Jobkeeper is a very important package to business. So I'd be suggesting that you perhaps touch base with that as a quick task, as a link to jump on there. I would do that personally fortnightly or monthly. Monthly is probably good enough, because if you do that in the middle of the month, you can see that whether or not you comply for the following month. Now, it's really important to do something like that, and that is a very good question, I might add. because these things are changing so quick. What you don't want to do is get locked into an expectation of some form of financial support. Lock that into your cash flow consideration and then be unaware or caught unaware or caught exposed by a change occurring, and then you're not factoring that in early enough. That could in fact leave you exposed in having too many staff, not managing that particular risk profile early enough or fast enough. An example of that would be if you had full-time or casual staff, they're getting paid $1,500 Jobkeeper payment per fortnight. You did that for a month. You had 5 staff on, they get $7,500 per fortnight, $15,000 for the month. And then you found out that that change had occurred and you were no longer eligible for that support. Now that could mean that you could be left exposed to that $15,000 of risk. So it's worth jumping on board and seeing if there's any changes so you can see if there's any risk associated with that. I hope that makes sense, and I hope that answers your question. Now, why I look at it through this particular lens is in operating a business at any time, understanding your cash position is really, really important. Understanding your net free cash is very important as well. Now, let me explain the difference between your cash position and your net free cash and the momentum of it going or building up or going backwards. So your cash position is where you are today and where you expect that to be in any given point in the future. Now, I've spent 30 years in commercial lending and understanding and dealing with small cash flow budgets and very large cash flow budgets. And the thing that I've found to be very, very true across all businesses is having a very simple understanding of the movement of that cash. So if you've got cash in the bank today, let's call it $10,000. You know that that's what's sitting there and that is available to meet commitments. If you know that you're going to make $30,000 of sales in the next 30 days, you then need to consider the terms of those sales, when that $30,000 will in fact reach your bank account. What you also need to consider is the cost of generating that $30,000, the expenses, right? Say it costs you $25,000 to generate that $30,000 of revenue, right? That would mean that would have cost you $25,000 out of the $30,000. The difference between those two is what I call net free cash. It's $5,000, right? So that would be how you could conceivably see your bank account increasing or decreasing into the future. A very, very easy way of looking at that. What is your total revenue? Then what is your total expenses? Your net free cash is the difference. Net free cash can be a positive or a negative. You add that to your existing cash in bank. The only difference that we have to consider with that is, are we adding all our expenses into that line? Are we also allowing for things like GST or other requirements and taxes? We need to be looking at it from a real perspective, so not double counting some of that position in revenue, whether or not you're including GST, or not allowing for our BAS payments or a PAYG in terms of our expense line as well. It's very important to get a good understanding of your net free cash, because that momentum going upwards or going backwards gives you an indication of your burn rate. Are you going to burn through or chew through or use that $10,000? If that expense line was in fact $35,000 and your revenue was $30,000, and say the money came in as you earned the money straight away, so we're not considering any payment terms of 30, 60, 90 days or something similar. So you've generated $30,000. It's cost you $35,000 to make that generate that money. You would then see that your $10,000 would go up by $30,000 to $40,000, and then you would pay out $35,000, reducing your cash in your bank account to $5,000. You could see that you could only do that for 2 months in a row before that you would run out of money. So when I look at net free cash, I'm looking at it through the lens of how much do I have in the bank? Is that building upwards or is it building downwards? Have I got enough revenue coming in versus my operating cost? Through the lens of COVID-19, we need to be considering it through the different packages. We need to be having a look at a cash flow on a month-to-month basis, and having a look at what can be deferred, what's being supported by access to credit, so we can use that as a support mechanism to get through, or what packages of support, whether it be through employment support and wages, or some other form of deferment, whether it be through PAYG tax or payroll tax, or some other form of incentive coming back through. I hope that that's answered your question. I've gone a little bit deeper to understand the contextual risk of the the Jobkeeper changes on your cash flow. Now, I was actually talking about NT Tourism support grants. It is being administered by KPMG Business Support. You can find that through either Northern Territory Tourism NT or through the NT business NT government business websites. I might move right along. So where we're at with time. So that has chewed up a little bit of our time. There is support mechanisms for sports and arts organisations. There has been $2 million that has been put aside for that particular sector. It's both for groups and also for not-for-profit and or organisations. Please have a look at that. That can be accessed and seen through the Department of Tourism, Sports and Culture website. I'm just going to get us back caught up a little bit. Part of that is 1.3 that's been reprioritised funding, and that's to support for a whole range of different things. But it's also about establishing a working group that's going to be established to have a look at what mechanisms that we can look at by improving or generating a recovery plan for the tourism sector in regards to tourism, sport, and active recreation, to see that we can step out of the existing challenge or the current crisis that we're in. The business grants, I'm going to step through at the moment. These are mostly being fully subscribed. They closed a week ago. So I've been working on this particular presentation for quite some time, so I'm just going to step through those. One of the challenges you might face just on that is it was massively oversubscribed, and you may have a need to get a second round of quotes if that first quote does in fact expire. Many quotes in the marketplace only have a 30, 60, 90 day quotation period to hold the particular price. So please be mindful that when, or if you do in fact get approved to some of these packages, please, the first thing you might want to do is have a look at the quote, have a look at whether or not that particular price is going to be maintained or held as part of your process. If it's not, you may need to go through a requote phase prior to initiating or approving any particular works. You'd like to do that before you step in to formal approval of the works, so you don't get caught out because of a price change. The same for the home improvement scheme. Once again, that has fully closed at this point. I have reading some of the data come out last week. There's about 600 or 700 of these particular vouchers that were finalised or approved out of about 19,500. So this particular package has been extended for a rollout for a 12-month period, which will flatten the income support mechanism through that whole period of time. The government had to do that because the massive amount of demand on that particular package. The immediate works program was mostly, and I'm not really going to get into, for not-for-profits and community organisations, which is not really the mandate of our particular webinar here today. But please note that is there. If you are part of these organisations, you may want to have a look at that from a organisational perspective, from whether it be from a not-for-profit, a sporting group or some other organisation. It could be something that you might be able to help local trades, local businesses get through. That was the intent of this particular package, whilst also supporting your particular group. We've touched on government fees and charges in relation to utilities and amenities, but the government have also put a freeze on changing any costs for their fees and charges. So I believe that that's in place until 30 June 2021. Once again, payroll tax exemptions are possible under certain eligibility requirements. So just having a look at the time, we're tracking pretty well. We're going to step into the Queensland government support mechanisms here. The Queensland government have rolled out numerous packages. One was a $950 million payroll tax relief. Another one was a $500 million, $500 million worker retaining and assistance package, and another $500 million job support loans package. These particular packages can be seen from the website, the business website for Queensland. I will refer to that on the last slide of the presentation. So you might be able to take a screenshot of that and then get access to these particular packages in more depth. There is a TAFE Queensland and university access to free online courses for people that live within the jurisdiction of the Queensland. That's been done to provide access to skill up during a period of, I guess, inefficiency, if you like, if some of us aren't working. You've got access to that period of time where you can actually improve your particular skills and be ready for the future. There's also a $1 billion industry support package, $150 million relief and assistance package from NBN Co, $100 million electricity package for small, medium business, and a Jobs Finder Queensland side as well. These particular packages, once again, can be found with more details on the Queensland website. I'm going to see if I've got that, which is business.qld.gov.au. Okay, now I have gone through the Northern Territory one. I'm just going to give you that. That's nt.gov.au, and you'll be able to make your way through to the business and industry and then support for business programs initiative, in particular COVID-19. Excuse me. And on the NT government site, they've also got links in relation to the Australian government support packages as well, which is the early childhood education relief package, the Jobkeeper payment package, deferred business loan package, cash flow support relief, and the changes to company directors and access to credit. So that's all on the one site from the NT government, nt.gov.au. Okay, so I think we've just wrapped up Queensland. It's worth stepping through one of those packages. Once again, when you're looking at those packages, start with eligibility. Look at the intent, find what the eligibility is, look at the deadline, the timeline. Have a look at the deadline. Has it passed? Therefore, it's no longer open. And have a look at when it may close, right? If it's only 3 days away and you can't get it done in the next 3 days, spending any time and energy on it is going to be a waste of time, which is going to be counterproductive to your business. So please take that approach. It doesn't matter from a federal government perspective or from an NT or a Queensland or W government perspective. Take that particular approach. Then also write down a order of priority based on your first check, and then the closure times, the amount of support, and then after you've ticked off those where you've put in for the application or the support, then also have a follow-up date on whether or not you've been approved. And then when you have been approved, also have a follow-up date diarised to ensure that you're just keeping on top of any particular changes. Okay, let's keep stepping through. We're nearly there, guys. Only a few minutes to go, and we've only got a few slides to go also. So let's have a look at the Western Australian government support packages. Here we've got $9 million relief package for on-demand transport industry. The $17.5 million of one-off grants to businesses, small and medium, and $1 billion COVID-19 economic health relief package. Now, when we have a look at these packages, they are on wa.gov.au. and it's quite a good site that's been created from the Western Australian Government. It steps it out very, very well from a whole range of aspects, whether looking at the early stage, having a look at the hospitality requirements from a hygiene and training perspective, the financial relief mechanisms there, and also general advice for employers coming through the pandemic from a private sector perspective and what sort of advice you need to be considering. There's also FIFO and mining links there and how it relates to those particular industries, business and construction, and just general communication from the WA government. So there is a whole range of particular links. It's worth noting what the stage 1, stage 2 restrictions look like and how they are rolling back. And that's more from an operational perspective rather than from a grant perspective or a package perspective. So when you have a look at on wa.gov.au, you can find very, very readily the links to these particular packages that are there for support. There is also payroll tax relief, which can be increased the threshold up to $1 million from the 1st of July. I'm not on top of the payroll relief or those particular packages at the moment from WA or from Queensland. I'm more on top of what's happening in the Northern Territory. But what you'll find is there will be a requirement in terms of your PAYG, a deadline for you to comply by, and also that it'll close by, and then for you to get that particular support. The payroll relief typically is in either deferring or the non-payment of payroll tax. So the state and territory governments are not looking to earn that revenue, if you'd like, or be paid that payroll tax in the next period of time. So just having a look at this here, the payroll tax waiver for small medium is annual wages of less than $7.5 million. That's the same amount as what we had in the Northern Territory. 159 million for relief fund to provide crisis support. It might be worth having a look at that, find out what the eligibility requirements are in particular for that, because what you want to do is be aware of how that might support you going forward. So the WA government have actually had, one-off credit supports in terms of electricity bills, no utility disconnections occurring due to deferment. So they've put a whole range of different structures in place, providing a one-off grant of $17,500 to businesses that had a payroll tax of between $1 million and $4 million through the 2019 financial year. So there's a whole range of different support mechanisms there. It's worth having a look at that. What you'll find is some of those things are quite difficult to comply with for the small, medium operator. So you need to really be etching through and finding where the gaps are for you and then how you might be complying with that. There we go. That was my last slide. So thank you for joining us. This is a presentation from Business Station, Australian Small Business Advisory Services Digital Solutions, which is an Australian government initiative. And I'm proud to be representing Digital Enterprises, a Northern Territory business advice, digital and technology company, which also incorporates cybersecurity solutions, not only in the Northern Territory, but also Australia-wide. And once again, here is the different websites. So the first one is www.australia.gov.au. That's for any federal government requirements. We've got business.queensland.gov.au for Queensland. We've got wa.gov.au for WA. And finally, we've got nt.gov.au for the Northern Territory government. Thank you very much for joining us. I will stay online for just a minute to see if there's any questions come through. If there's not, I will wind this up. I'm going to stop sharing my presentation, so I might be able to step in and see if there is any other chats from attendees. because it has not come through. Just jumping into the Q&A here. So I've got one answered. That was from Rebecca. We answered that earlier. So thank you for that, Rebecca. I can see there's a few more people online at the moment. Please, if you do have any questions, do drop them in so we can answer that. There might be other people that will come through after the webinar that might also have similar questions that you may have had in not being aware. Just while I'm waiting, once again, I'll just recap. Preserving cash when we have uncertain times in business is one of the most important things. So understanding your cash position now, what's in your bank account, is very, very important. Also understanding how your next few months look from I call it a net free cash position, what revenue you've got coming in, what expenses you've got going out, and whether or not that momentum is going upwards in terms of cash going in the bank or downwards, drawing the money out of the bank. It's really important to understand that and do that roughly for each month, and I would do it for the next 6 months. And I know the further you get out, the more uncertain it becomes. I also know it's very difficult at the moment, particularly with some businesses in complete lockdown. Some other businesses may be trying to ascertain whether or not we have a restricted trading position going forward. The whole point of doing what I'd call a quick and dirty cash flow is to get some form of visibility of that. And the reason why we want some form of visibility is so we can start to make some informed decisions. Right? So what we need to do is we need to have a look at the revenue, we need to have a look at the expenses, and then the net free position. Then what we want to do is we want to have a look at what government support is there. Is that going to top up you know, the negative position, if it in fact is you know, not you know, on the positive, so going backwards. We need to understand the impact that has on our cash position, our bank account, right? And we need to find out really how much time do we have. Now, from a business owner, I found that when I've done this over, you know, a long period of time, it gives me insight. Now, I was going to say confidence. It's the wrong word in the times that we face, but it gives me insight into where I'm going in, you know, in the next 2 weeks and the next month, but also the next 6 months. Then it gives me insight into how much time we have. You know, one of the most challenging parts of being in business is, you know, it's very personal, particularly small, medium enterprise, because it means it could in fact affect our livelihood, our families, and so on. So, you know, it can have an impact on our mental health. And that can lead to things like depression or anxiety and so on. So it's about getting a reasonable handle on your cash so you can start to make some informed decisions. You know, are you using all the packages of support that's out there at the moment? You know, are you looking at the bank support and deferment? Are you looking at you know, the operating costs, utilities and amenities and deferment? Have you spoken to the banks and are you eligible for a unsecured you know, bank line of credit or bank loan that can help top up your net free cash position to help you ride through the next, you know, month, 2 months, 6 months and so on. Having a look at what that net free cash looks like and how we are you know, using it, absorbing it, or how it's disappearing is really, really important. Because as we come through a cycle on a downturn, what we're trying to understand is how much cash we've got, how we're using that cash, how are we delaying the utilisation of that cash. So when we're coming through the cycle, we can see, are we going to come through with enough money in the bank to come out the other end? Or are we going to go too deep and hit a catastrophic moment, which is effective business failure? And the reason why we want to have a look at that is we want to understand how far away that might be. Is it 2 weeks away? Is it 4 weeks away? Is it 8 weeks away? Is it 2 months away, or so on? And the reason why we want to do that is we want to understand, firstly, do we have time to change, you know, that quick and dirty outlook, you know, the revenue line and the expenses. Do we have to make changes to our cost lines? Do we have to negotiate things faster? Do we have to negotiate them more, deeper? So more deferment or deeper deferment, particularly if it's rent or lease. If you're paying $1,000 a week and you see that, in 2 months' time you're going to run out of money, and you might have negotiated that down to $500 relief, and you can still see you're going to run out of money. But you might see that if it's $250, you might make it through. That's why you need to look at your position like a quick and dirty cash flow. Because what you're trying to work out, what you're trying to figure out is, with all these moving parts, all the government support, keeping employees, all the costs that we have in running a business, can we find a way in building a cash flow budget that we can see our way through the bottom of that cycle? So that's the most important point in business coming through a downturn, the bottom of that particular cycle. As we look at the bottom of that cycle, then what we want to do is explore the types of things that we need to do to build back up again, and also the support mechanisms there, whether it be from the government or whether it be from stakeholders or landlords and so on. How fast do we need to build that back up before that cash either keeps going down or does in fact start to return to a more acceptable pathway? Only when we do that can we start to make informed decisions. Only when we do that can we start to say whether or not we can see a way forward or we are going to struggle. Only when we do that can we make decisions around our personal lives as business owners, understanding our personal risk profile. Do we have personal guarantees to bank debts? Are we personally liable to insolvency at some given point in the future after the exemption period? Have we got personal debts associated with the contributions going into a business, whether it be through home loans, credit cards, personal loans, equipment finance, and so on? Only when we have a look at what happens at the bottom of that cycle, and as we step back out of that, and this is different for every business, can we start to build a plan of recovery and of return to normal. Now, of course, part of that is how we retain jobs and how we retain our employees, but we also need to look at through the lens of the business survival, okay? And in the context of business survival, the impact it has on us as whether it be directors or business owners or sole proprietors personally, and our liabilities that sit in that. So the challenge that we face today is pretty difficult, to say the least. We need to become very strong at this quick and dirty cash position. And we need to be assessing it virtually on a week-to-week basis and definitely on a fortnightly, monthly basis. And the reason for that is we need to work out, is that change either increasing or decreasing subject to the actions that we take now? When we have a look at the bottom of that cycle, it's only a prediction, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it will be the bottom. It could be worse, but it doesn't mean it can't be better. And the way we change that is the actions that we take, right? It's, can we find new revenue streams that can drive, an increase in the bottom of that cycle, or more cash in the bank? Can we restructure or rearrange cost lines? Are we using all the government packages to their best requirements? So we can come through that particular cycle and in fact bounce out of the bottom and rebuild back up. Now, that's pretty challenging. It can be pretty challenging for people that's got long-term knowledge and expertise in not only cash management, but also business management. So it's worth reaching out to people that have deep knowledge that they can support you, particularly if you're in different jurisdictions like the Northern Territory Government. Northern Territory Government have got other grants, like certain Queensland Government and the WA Government do, that aren't part of the COVID-19 support packages. For instance, in the Northern Territory Government, something called the the Northern Territory Business Growth grants. Now, if you comply with those particular grants, that may give you access to a consultant that has this particular knowledge that can support you in developing a quick and dirty cash flow. That quick and dirty cash flow could be what you need to help you through by understanding your risk of business and survival and recovery. It could also be what you need to understand to provide some form of confidence or comfort or avoid the mental health issues that we are facing today when we run a business and we understand that there is very significant risk that we face. Anyway, please know that through some amazing partners and skilled people such as Business Station, my business, Digital Enterprises, Staff Leverage and so on, that there are people here that can help you. It's very difficult times, but where we make the best decisions are when we make informed decisions. And I know it's very difficult. An informed decision is one where we try to determine, and that can be difficult in itself, what that future is going to look like, and then how we can make that better. And that is how we see businesses survive and come through difficult times. So this particular, I'm just winding up now, guys. Here we were looking to talk around some of the challenges facing small, medium enterprises and understanding the government stimulation packages that are available. I've gone in and given you some insight to what those packages are, the challenges of the change, but also I've dropped a fair amount of time into understanding your cash position and how you can actually view that from your perspective or reaching out to people that can help you. Thank you so much for attending. I've gone over here, but I've given a whole lot more value, if you like, to try and understand the impact on a quick and dirty. I've just seen something come through. And if you've got any, if you need any further information, please don't hesitate to reach out to Business Station and they can certainly pass through any of those questions to myself or anyone else. Have a great day, and I hopefully and sincerely we wish you all the very, very best in understanding where you are and to support you into the future. Sometimes the greatest challenges are the ones that make us the best version of us in the future. Have a great day, and I'll see you later. Bye.